Dan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on calling.
Yeah. Calling is a really important thing, especially in our work life, as we ask the question, at least many of us who are faith ask, is what I'm doing important? Does God care about what I'm doing? And one of my favorite quotes about calling comes from the theologian Frederick Buechner, who says, the place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. So it requires that reflection. What's my deep gladness as a person? What do I enjoy? What do I love? And where's the world hungering? Where's the need? Where's the pain? Where is the place that needs to be filled?
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a beautiful quote. And, thinking about, what the world is needing and where your gladness is found. So tell me a little bit about, how do you know what your calling is from the Lord?
Yeah. Well, I think calling is very, it's really interesting because God calls all of us in general in a certain way, like in terms of the 10 commandments, loving our neighbors ourselves, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength and such. These are the primary things that we're called to do. And as believers and followers of Jesus, we're all called to do that. And we're learning to do that. But each of us have particular callings. And as you remember in the book of Esther, her calling is the great quote is, for such a time as this, that you have been called to save your people from destruction. Now, I know that's very grandiose. And as career coaches, we're not necessarily saving people from destruction, though maybe sometimes we are. We like to think. But what's important is to know what is the time, what is the space that I'm in, and to say, okay, what is my gifting? What is my calling? Who am I? How am I wired? How has God made me? Where are my passions? Where's my purpose? And how does that intersect in a place where I can help people and also make a living? Because that's important too. God cares about that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I always tell people, especially when career coaching, it's kind of finding that sweet spot between what you're passionate about, where your skills are at, and what you can make a salary or a living at, and really doing that deep thought and analysis of where your passions, your purpose, your values, and just reflecting on that and spending time with that in prayer to find your calling as well. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And one of my favorite parts about the whole discernment process is to ask the question, what kind of person am I? Am I the kind of person where if God is trying to speak to me, can I hear him? Are there too many voices going on in my life? Am I distracted by important things that are important things to care for, like family and loved ones? But am I also distracted by other things to the point where maybe I can't hear the voices of God as much because there are so many competing narratives in my life? And I think that's why it's so important that we're learning to cultivate, to be the kind of person that if God speaks to us, can I hear him? And those happen through simple, ordinary things, like in John 10, where Jesus says, the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. Sheep are not known to be the brightest animals, but they actually can understand when the shepherd calls them. They recognize the voice. They're in a pattern of life where they listen for that voice. And that voice is learned by reading scripture. That voice is learned by being in community and worshiping regularly with other people. It's by having friendships and mutual encouragement. It's by being connected in such a way where if God can speak to us, we're the kind of people that are dialed in and plugged in. I always think about it like I've got an antenna, and if God's sending the signal, am I tuned into the frequency to where I can hear him, or am I tuned into something else? And of course, we have other things that we're doing, but there's a way where am I interruptible? Am I the kind of person, again, who can hear God's voice? Am I listening for him? And again, a lot of this has to do with experience, looking to your past and saying, okay, I sense God's calling me to do this, and giving something a try. And sometimes it's very clear God says, go and do this. And sometimes we try things and it's not the right fit. And we sometimes hear incorrectly, and sometimes that's okay too. But that's why we have a community which we live and we reflect and we can talk and learn.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I love that scripture verse. And I think what's really important to think about is even if you do misstep, right? Like maybe you do hear that calling incorrectly, is that you'll always learn something, right? Everything in a sense is a lesson. And I think the Lord calls us, like, even if we do fall, to, kind of dust off our knees and get back up, because he'll always be there for us. And when you were talking about, the scripture verse, what popped into my head was the parable of the lost sheep as well, where, if you are in this space where you can't hear the Lord's voice, right? But the Lord leaves the 99 sheep to find that one. So even if you can't hear him, he'll always be knocking, and he'll actually extend his arm out to connect with you and to be with you and to love on you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the most beautiful images of the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
And also one of the most challenging images in all of the Bible is the story of Job, where it seems like he's done everything to find God, and it seems everything has been taken away from him. And yet he has all these questions, which are totally legitimate questions.
Yeah.
Answer these questions for me, God. And we can apply that to our careers. God, what do you want me to do? Why isn't this working? Why do I have to deal with this kind of person? Why am I suffering all these things? And I've done what you've wanted me to do, the best of my ability. You do everything right and still suffer horribly. But the good news is that it's not so much about having our questions answered. It's about having a relationship with the answerer. It's about being connected with the one who has the source of life, who can infuse that within us. And often it's the story of Job. He doesn't even answer the questions. The answer is God himself. And I think that's what's so wonderful about the mystery that we're actually talking about with calling, because we can't know all of it. It's always a mystery. That in the mystery, the pursuit and the love of Christ and the pursuit after him is this journey of delving deeper into life. And our careers are part of that, among other pieces of life.